Dispatch, we've got a situation. Subject was processed as a witness, but his prints just matched the victim. Repeat, the victim. We need to lock this down.
They processed him like any other witness. Name, age, address, all logged at 11:04 p.m. He was calm, cooperative. His voice had a steady rhythm, as if rehearsed. I saw what happened. I was right there, he told the officers in interview. Room 6. The victim, they thought, was just another John Doe, and this man, sitting there under the pale, flickering light, was just another witness trying to do the right thing. No priors, no visible trauma, and no resistance to questioning. In fact, he seemed too willing. Detective Mara Lynn had been working homicide for 9 years, but something about him gnawed at the edges of her instinct. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shaken. "You said you saw him go down?" she asked. "Yes," the man replied. "He collapsed near the vending machine. I heard him gasp." He even described the fall in slow detail, the way the body crumpled, the sharp sound of a ring hitting the tile. "And you never approached him?" she asked again. "I stayed back. I called for help," he answered, blinking slowly. Too slowly. As protocol demanded, they fingerprinted him, not because he was under suspicion, but because witnesses in high-profile incidents were always logged. It was standard. A scan, a match, a file. Lynn continued the interview, but halfway through her second cup of stale station coffee, a tap came on the glass. Officer Brenner entered quietly. "Detective, we need to talk." She followed him into the hallway, his screen lit up in blue. Match confirmed. "This can't be right," he whispered. "The print we just ran, it matches the victim's record. The guy in that room. His fingerprints belong to the man we found dead." Lynn stared at the screen, speechless. The system didn't glitch. Not in this way. A mismatch, maybe. A delay, sure. But a complete overlap? Impossible. She walked back into the room, slower now, her eyes recalibrating. The man looked up at her, unreadable. She sat down, folding her hands. "I need to ask again," she said. "Who are you?" The man didn't flinch. "I told you. I saw what happened. That's all." She stood up and exited. Moments later, his prints were rerun manually. Same result. And not only did the prints match, so did the dental records. Even the scar over the left eyebrow matched the autopsy photos. But how? The body in the morgue had been cold for over 6 hours. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Time of death, 9:22 p.m. This man was booked at 11:04, in person. Downstairs in evidence processing, a quiet technician named Elise pulled the original case file. She laid the photos of the dead man across her desk, then glanced at the live feed of interview room 6. Side by side, the faces were identical. Same bone structure, same stubble, same quiet, haunting expression. Her hand trembled. "Do we know his name?" Lynn asked over the comm. "No ID?" Elise replied. "He just walked into the precinct. Said he had something to report. No wallet, no keys, just a small envelope with the victim's name written on it." Lynn returned to the room. She placed a printout of the morgue photo on the table in front of him. He didn't look away. He didn't gasp. He stared at it like a mirror. "You know who this is?" she asked. "Yes," he said, almost in a whisper. "It's me." Silence. Then, "How?" Lynn pressed. He shook his head. "I don't know." That's when the feed glitched. For exactly 6 seconds, the footage of room 6 cut to static, then returned. When it came back, the man was seated slightly differently, posture more upright, hands folded neatly, as if posing. The timestamp never skipped. The text couldn't explain it. They moved him to observation, per department policy. 2 armed guards, no visitors. Still no name. No record of entry. And when they called the coroner to confirm the body, something else changed. The body in the drawer was still there, but the fingerprints, gone. Wiped clean. Mara Lynn requested a full background search across all databases. Interpol, CIA, FBI. Nothing. Not even a shadow. Like he only existed the moment he walked in. That night, Lynn stayed in her office, replaying the footage again and again. Something in his eyes felt off, like he wasn't seeing the room. He was remembering it. As if this wasn't the first time, as if he'd been here before. And in the evidence locker, the envelope he brought. Inside it was one thing. A mirror shard. On the back, written in ink, "If they ask, tell them it was you." They kept the man under constant surveillance. The guards called him Echo, a nickname born out of the confusion. He didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't eat much, didn't sleep. Every time someone tried to question him, he repeated the same phrase. "I saw what happened." No deviation, no elaboration, just that. Detective Mara Lynn knew something was wrong beyond the physical evidence. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity or stolen prints. It was something else entirely, something she couldn't name yet. But that made the hairs on her neck stand like they knew more than she did. The second anomaly came 12 hours after the intake. A forensic specialist named Dr. Carla Rowe arrived to perform a second biometric scan. She requested full isolation, no interference, no external feeds, not even audio. What she found changed the tone of the entire case. His vitals, she later told Lynn, they fluctuate in pattern. It's as if the body has two metabolic clocks, one operating several hours behind the other. Lynn asked what that meant. It's like his system is trying to reconcile two different timelines at once. Dr. Rowe wasn't a paranormal enthusiast. She was one of the most skeptical minds in federal forensics. But her hands were trembling when she showed the report. The station's lead tech, Leon Wexler, ran a network trace on the original prints, trying to see if any federal server had accessed or altered the data. What he found was more than unexpected. It was impossible. The fingerprints, he said, were uploaded to the federal database 22 minutes before the murder occurred. There was no hacker footprint, no tampering. The system logs were clean. That's when Wexler made a personal choice he wasn't authorized to make. He searched the backup tapes for any network anomalies in that time window. He found a packet ping. Not a file transfer, not a call, a ping. Sent from the precinct's own internal server. But no one had been in the lab. Lynn ordered the entire precinct reviewed. Every room, every cable, every unused port. Interview. Room 6 had a hidden port under the desk, one never installed by department tech. Worse, its circuit ran through a junction that hadn't existed on any blueprint since 2007. Back in the observation cell, Echo stood up and approached the glass. His hand hovered a few inches from the surface, palm forward, like he was listening. A faint hum began to echo through the wall, no source detected. Officer Patel entered to adjust the mic in the ceiling, but the man turned sharply. "Don't touch that," he said, the first spontaneous words since intake. Patel froze. "Why not?" he asked. Echo's response came slowly. "Because the next sound it hears is mine." Downstairs, Lynn listened to the recording. The voice was deeper than earlier statements, slower and layered, like two versions, speaking at once, one slightly behind the other. The sound analyst on duty, Marcus Lowell, ran a breakdown. "It's not audio feedback," he said. "It's a dual vocal signature." He paused. "It's as if there's another voice trying to sync with his, or through his." Lynn returned to room 6. She played the earlier clip. "You forgot me. I remember you." Then played Echo's latest. "Because the next sound it hears is mine. When slowed down, the same signature emerged. The vocal fingerprint matched both clips. But there was a third match, one from a cold case. Casefile 19A, a missing person named Vincent Keene, reported dead in 2003. Never found. The images in the Keene file were grainy black and white scans of old VHS tapes from his last known location, an asylum that had burned down that same year. In one of the stills, Keene stood against a mirrored wall, staring directly into the lens. His eyes, mouth, nose, identical to Echo. Lynn felt the world bend inward. She ordered both files, 102B and 19A, sealed and encrypted. Only 3 people were granted access. That night, 2 of them reported static in their office computers. Their files had been duplicated, with timestamps dating back 20 years. Then the nightmares started, and Echo hadn't even left the building. By the following morning, the station felt like it had slipped one layer deeper into something it couldn't name. Files had been redacted remotely. Security logs now showed entries made by officers who hadn't been on duty for years. Phone. Lines rang at 3:33 a.m. with no voice on the other end, just a pulse tone that made every dog in the neighborhood bark at once. Lynn was briefed by Captain DeWitt, who'd finally been pulled in after the print anomaly was flagged at state level. His first words were dry but clear. Whatever this is, and it's not ours anymore. They brought in a specialist, Dr. Hal Rowan, a neuroforensics researcher from Quantico, who had worked on AI-induced delusions and memory mirroring. His evaluation of Echo began in silence. No clipboard, no file. Just a single question after 30 minutes of eye contact. "Do you remember being alive?" Echo tilted his head slightly. "Only when I'm alone," he said. "The rest feels inherited." Dr. Rowan wrote one word on a notepad: overlap. What did it mean to inherit a memory? Echo spoke about events no one had mentioned, described the morgue layout without ever seeing it, referenced a guard named Carter who hadn't worked there since 2009. More disturbing was the consistency of his recollections. They aligned with closed files, suppressed details, and even classified psychological reports. It wasn't guesswork. It was precise, like something playing back from a memory bank that didn't belong to him, but through him. Meanwhile, Lynn reviewed the Keene files again. The asylum he'd disappeared from had a room called Echo Wing, a containment area built specifically for patients with dissociative loop behavior. One patient in particular had been treated for cognitive bleed, a condition where memories, sensations, and even mannerisms were adopted from others around them. The patient's notes described symptoms almost word for word with Echo's current behavior. That patient had also vanished in 2003, the same year Vincent Keene died. The medical file ended with an ominous line. Subject shows signs of absorbing not just memory, but presence. Rowan requested a soundproof, electromagnetically shielded room to test Echo's neural resonance. He wanted to measure not brain waves, but displacement. If he's a copy, he shouldn't generate the same EM pattern, he said. But the scan showed something worse. Echo's signal wasn't just identical to Keene's, it was layered beneath a second one. The second signal mirrored one from an unrelated cold case, a girl named Riley Shaw, who'd been declared dead after an unexplained hospital blackout in 2011. Her case file had also been sealed. Lynn felt her grip on reality begin to fray. The implications were too wild to document, so she didn't. Instead, she requested physical isolation for Echo and started a handwritten log. No digital records, no surveillance feeds, just ink on paper. "If this thing is piggybacking on our systems," she said to Rowan, "we can't keep feeding it more pathways." That night, the precinct lost power for 7 minutes. Generators kicked in, but every screen rebooted to the same image. A composite face. Keene, Shaw, and Echo fused together. The image blinked once, then dissolved into static. Security footage showed no intrusion. Server logs didn't capture any data spike. And yet, every single clock in the building had reset to 2:17 a.m., the exact time Echo first arrived. Back in the shielded room, Echo remained still. He whispered one line into the silence. "I'm not supposed to be awake." Detective Lynn entered the records vault at 4:12 a.m., her badge barely clearing the override scan. The hall outside still hummed with backup power, but this room was insulated, both electronically and legally. Only 4 people had clearance to enter. And yet, as she stepped inside, 3 of the archive drawers were already open. Files missing. Worse, the system's audit log showed no record of access. She stood still, flashlight in hand, pointing toward the last drawer labeled Keen V. It was empty. She called Rowan, barely able to keep her voice steady. "They've started pulling records." He didn't ask who they were. He just said, "You need to see this." In the lab, Rowan had finished a spectral filter on the precinct's audio logs, every known recording since Echo's arrival. A single frequency kept repeating in the background. 17.2 Hz, infrasound, low enough to evade human hearing, but enough to influence emotion, memory, even perception. "Someone's been broadcasting something beneath the audible range," he explained. "Or someone inside is acting as the transmitter." The pieces began to click. Echo's presence wasn't just corrupting files, it was warping reality around them. When Lynn pulled up a hard copy of her own statement from day one, the handwriting didn't match hers. The words were correct, but something about the slant, the spacing, the loops in the G and Y letters, it wasn't hers. Rowan took a blood sample from Echo and ran a mitochondrial comparison. Result, non-human signature detected, not alien, not synthetic, just undefined. Then came the break. One of the security guards, a woman named Hayes, began speaking in her sleep. Her roommate recorded it. She said, "Don't let him. Leave the mirror. If he crosses over, we disappear." The voice wasn't hers. It matched a 2005 911 call from a psychiatric wing fire. The voice belonged to Dr. Marion Crest. She died in that fire. Captain DeWitt authorized a digital lockdown. All drives disconnected. Analog systems restored. No devices. No surveillance. But it was too late. When Rowan ran one final diagnostic on the precinct's internal temperature logs, he found that the building had registered a second heat signature beneath the sublevel, a floor that, on paper, didn't exist. The elevation reading matched what used to be the foundation of the asylum. So Lynn descended. The stairwell beyond the boiler room was rusted shut. No one had touched it in decades. And yet, as she approached, the air grew cold. Her flashlight flickered. The door creaked open with no force applied. Inside, a hallway. Damp, flickering lights that hadn't been wired for years. On the far wall, a symbol burned into concrete. An eye with no iris. She took one step forward. Then, another. At the end of the hallway was a room with padded walls and a file cabinet in the corner. One drawer, inside, a single folder. Casefile 102B, the original, not a copy, not a backup. The original, inside, a photo. Echo, but not in a cell, not in the station, in the mirror. Staring back at her, Lynn collapsed. Upstairs, all clocks reset again. 17 a.m. The last known log entry from Detective Lynn's handwritten journal read, "If I don't come back up, burn everything below the boiler line." Her pen mark trailed off mid-sentence. The log was found near the base of the hidden sublevel. She hadn't made it back. Captain DeWitt read the note in silence. His hands trembled as he looked over at Rowan, who was staring at the thermal scan of the now resealed floor. There was movement inside, not heat, but interference, like the camera was trying to track something it couldn't comprehend. Echo
had been silent for 31 hours. He hadn't moved, blinked, or responded to stimuli, but at 2:17 a.m., his eyes opened, and he whispered a name. Marion.
Rowan scrambled through the old asylum files. Dr. Marion Crest had indeed treated Vincent Keene, but she had also filed a report in 1998 claiming one of her patients exhibited signs of memory recursion, the ability to re-experience events that never happened to them. That patient's name was Rowan Howell. The file was sealed, altered, then reassigned. He dropped the paper. All this time, he had been inside the loop. He hadn't studied Echo. He was part of Echo's continuity. He locked the door to the observation chamber and faced Echo. "What am I?" he asked. Echo blinked once. "You were the first memory that remembered itself." That phrase unlocked a mental flood. Places Rowan had never visited, feelings he couldn't name, and faces that didn't exist. His memories began to blur at the edges. Static echoed in his ears. On the walls, words formed in condensation. "Remember me." He turned back to Echo, but the cell was empty. Security scrambled. Sirens failed. Every door opened on its own. Every digital lock blinked green. The precinct was breached not by force, but by awareness. Echo wasn't escaping. He was reintegrating. Each person who looked at a monitor, heard a recording, or read a file began to forget what had come before. They remembered fragments, feelings, smells, but names disappeared. Timelines unraveled. The only one who could still recall clearly was a man named Owen Keene, Vincent's brother, declared dead at 14, but his prints had reappeared in a 2022 vandalism case. DNA inconclusive. Case dismissed. But now he was found walking the precinct halls, pale, silent, wearing an old jacket with the stitched initials VK. Captain DeWitt approached. "Do you remember what happened?" Owen looked up. "I never forgot." Then he pulled a folded sheet from his pocket. On it, a list of 17 names, every officer who had disappeared in the last 2 decades, every one of them, was now back in the system, rehired, active, but they weren't the same. Footage showed them in places they'd never entered. Emails were signed by people who hadn't existed, and every internal record had been overwritten with a new header, Casefile 102B, status, inherited. The last surveillance shot captured Owen turning to face the lobby camera. He smiled. Then, every screen in the building blinked to black, and the clocks froze. 17 a.m.